Well, good afternoon, LinkedIn friends and YouTube. This being our second week that we'll simulcasting between both platforms. Welcome. We have an amazing conversation today. We're going to be talking about home-based businesses. Huge trend, really cool. And we have a wonderful expert with us, Cliff Walker. Cliff, welcome. Glad that you're here to talk to us about this.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. I'm delighted to be on. I appreciate you inviting me. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, this is a hot topic. I tell you, the surprise to me when my most recent book, The Self-Employed Life, came out May 4th, it launched as #1 new release in home-based small business, and that's been the highest ranking category. And quite honestly, Cliff, it was never a book, The Self-Employed Life. It makes sense, but it was never my expectation or intention that it would be ranking highest in home-based business. Clearly, this is an indication of how popular home-based businesses are, wouldn't you say?
I think so. And I think there's a trend towards them. And I think it's been driven to a certain extent, or driven further to a certain extent, Jeffrey, from the situation that we've been in around the world with the pandemic. I think people have got into the feel of working from home. Some of them like it, a bit more freedom, a bit more flexibility, can choose to do what they want to do when they want to do it, providing they get the work done in a lot of instances. And I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that maybe there is an alternative to that corporate, I like to call it corporate rat race because I was in the corporate world for so many years, but there are alternatives to that lifestyle or that type of career, really. And I think home-based business is set, for some incredible growth over the coming months and years, really.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to circle back to that. I just want to let you know, if you're watching live, if you have any questions, this is your chance to ask questions from, the global expert on home-based business, Cliff Walker. If you're watching in replay, ask your questions in the comments. I will be watching the thread carefully. Let's talk about the trend for a moment, because without a doubt, I agree with you. I think, the pandemic, global lockdowns has introduced, but do you think it's a case, as many other situations are, where this was coming anyway and maybe the pandemic kind of rushed it up? But do you think this was a trend going anyway?
I think it was, Jeffrey. I think it was. And I think it has been for some time, because I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that, there's never really any such thing as job security. If companies decide to downsize or change strategy, or they get taken over, I've had some very, very good friends being made redundant or lost their jobs several times, and I think people are starting to realize as well. You see, I talk about a job and I talk about income. And when I ask people, what do you really need? It's not really a job, it's the income, because the income pays for the school fees, the income pays for credit cards, the mortgage, the car payments, the holidays, all of that stuff. But traditionally, it's always been generated from having a job. And I think that's why people, for so many years have been locked into the job mentality. But I think people are starting to realize that there are alternative ways to generate income. And I think that's been a trend now for, quite some time. And as I say, and as you've said as well, with the pandemic, I think we're going to see it accelerate for sure.
Yeah, I love the distinction between job and income. And by the way, I'm Jeffrey Shaw. I'm here with Cliff Walker. So if you're just joining us, feel free to ask your questions, or if you're watching a replay, ask away in the thread. In preparation of our conversation today, I was thinking about the difference between home-based and working at home, right? Because the pandemic introduced the idea that a lot of people would be working at home. I've gathered my own thoughts on this, but I wanted to get yours. What do you, if anything, do you see a difference between, or what's the distinction between working at home and having a home-based business, do you think?
I think there's a couple of things. One is the fact that, home-based business is a business, and that means there is no limit. Typically, there's no limit on the income that can be generated. It depends on the type of business model you're working. It depends on the time and effort that you put into it. Whereas in a job, even if you're working from home, you're at a salary level typically. And I worked in the corporate world for many years, and typically, there is a salary band. It used to be in the UK, I don't know about the US so much, but they used to use the Hay management system. And what the Hay management system would do would evaluate a job, give it a score, and then you had a band. So you could never go outside of that band. You could be somewhere within the band. So I think there is a difference from that perspective. And I think there is a difference if you're working from home, you are still working the job that you do, you're just in a different environment, maybe a nicer environment, for some people a more difficult environment sometimes, because, they might not be set up the way that we're set up. I've got cameras, microphones, lights, and you've got the same thing over there, I can see. So I think that's a difference. But I think home-based business is different in the sense that it gives you more freedom and flexibility because you are in control of your work. And that in itself, Jeffrey, can be a challenge, of course, because people, are not always disciplined to do the work if they haven't got somebody, requesting something to a deadline to meet or something like that.
Yeah, I have to say, I kind of came to the same conclusion when I thought about the difference between working at home and having a home-based business. A lot of it comes down to intention, right? So if you're working at home, even if you enjoy it, it may come with some resistance because you might feel either forced to work at home, or even if it's the best scenario for you, it wasn't your original intention. Where a home-based business, particularly for those leaving a corporate job to start a home-based business, there's a very direct intention there. So let's talk about some of the challenges. You introduced one, which is the change of structure, if you will. What have you found are some of the expected challenges for someone who's been used to the corporate structure and corporate world to then begin a home-based business?
Well, I think there is the challenge of discipline that we've spoken about. Sometimes when you're at home, it's easier to, go out in the garden if it's sunny, or, switch something on the TV, or it can be, So I think you've got to have a discipline. And I think the other thing that's important if you're in a home-based business is to really understand that you're building something for yourself. And what I like to do, I think, is give people options. The type of business I build is, I like to refer to it as a parallel income. And that lowers the risk, because a lot of people in the corporate world, they have these golden handcuffs, and it's difficult, even if they're frustrated. And I find there's many people frustrated in the corporate world today. But the challenge is, how do I break free without any risk? Because, if I leave my position, to go and do something for myself, I'm going to lose the holidays, the pension, the car, maybe the status amongst my friends and family who see that I've got a great corporate role. So I think it's trying to minimize that risk. And there are lots of different business options out there today that can create, as I say, I like to refer to it not so much as a part-time income, but more a parallel income. Something that can be built up alongside your career without jeopardizing that career. And then you get to a point where you've got some choices. Some people love their career and they want to stay in their career, but they have a plan B in place if anything goes wrong. And some people are not so keen on their career. They want to break free. And when they get their income to a place where it's safe, they can make a decision as to whether or not they want to leave that corporate employment.
I love the idea of parallel income. I mean, it's such a more attractive term than side hustle, which I've done all that I can to stop using the term. I almost prefer side gig if I have to, because hustle in and of itself, can have some connotations that I don't agree with. And by the way, we have a couple of tools that will be available for you. Cliff has a tool that will be available to you in a moment. But in the meantime, I want to offer you what I have for you, which is a 12-month timeline, kind of a countdown month by month for the 12 months prior to leaving your corporate job to become self-employed. Super, super helpful. It's a result of interviewing a lot of people and having coached so many people in this transition for years. It's a super helpful timeline. So go ahead and grab that at selfemployedready.com. It's free, and it's just a really useful timeline as a resource. So I want to talk about the different types of businesses. I think that's on the mind of a lot of people, because it's easy to imagine that the most common home-based business, like you and I, are probably thought leadership, content creators. What else have you come across? What else do you see as far as other home-based business options?
I think there's there's a number. I think one of the challenges with being self-employed, I mean, I like to refer to Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, the employee quadrant, the self-employed quadrant on the left side. And then on the right side, you've got sort of the B quadrant for business and the I quadrant for investor. And I think one of the challenges with being self-employed, it depends really what you're doing, I suppose, is that often what you're doing is you're taking on, I like to say, if you're in a job, you're the focal point of income generation. If you don't turn up for work day after day after day, week after week after week, month after month, you're not going to continue to get paid, or not for very long. But when you move into self-employment, you're often the focal point of much more than just income generation. You have to, if you're a coach or a trainer, for example, I have a training background. If you're a coach or a trainer, you have to go out and find your clients, then you have to write your training material, then you have to deliver your training, then you have to follow up with your clients, you have to charge your clients, invoice them and collect your money, and all of that stuff is, being self-employed. So I think there's a couple of different options. Obviously, we've got the e-commerce online type option now. That's becoming, very popular, where people can build their own store or get a Shopify store or do some stuff on eBay or Amazon or whatever. That's a way to generate income from home as a home-based business. And then I've been involved in the referral or relationship marketing business for the last 20 odd years, really. And I see that as a great model, because that really does allow you to create leverage where you're not the focal point. You're not the focal point because you're creating leverage through a business model that's designed to allow you to create not just income, but time freedom. So I think there's a few different things out there. And of course, there's the traditional, type of home-based business. If you're a coach or a trainer, and you run a training company and you're doing that, you're delivering the content that you might have delivered at work, but you're doing it for yourself at home.
Yeah, one of my a coaching client of mine who's in my self-employed business institute over my shoulder. Her name is Jennifer, and Jennifer has a home-based bakery. Right. So the opportunities are tremendous. I mean, and I can imagine her building out a much more bigger commercial kitchen at some point, but she's a mom. She wants to work at home. She can deliver products. I mean, it's a really unique, there's just so many options for unique businesses. What's interesting, and particularly for somebody like Jennifer, I actually am encouraging her to document what she's learning, because I actually think in addition to the business she's building, I think she's also building a portfolio of knowledge that she can help other people with, right? To understand how to create what has been traditionally brick and mortar businesses, whether it's retail, online, bakery, and be able to still do it at home.
Yeah, and I had a friend of mine that did not exactly the same, but she did. She made great soup. So she started creating soups at home, and then getting some corporate clients and going around and, servicing the needs of the corporate client with the soups, and built a great little business. It was difficult to scale without, going into, like you say, a proper facility. But, she made a great income from home, that suited her and gave her the flexibility and the freedom of being at home as well.
Yeah. You mentioned a moment ago about all the multiple roles. And again, that being one of the challenges when we go from a corporate job to being self-employed is that you suddenly you don't have an IT team probably, right? You don't have those different departments and that you can call upon. Something you reminded me of something I had heard early on in my own career that really helped me understand this. And I think this is a big wake-up call for a lot of people. And it's the kind of the rule of thirds, which is that you spend about a third of your time doing admin stuff just to keep your business open, about a third of your time marketing to get clients, and really only about a third of the time delivering on something you get paid for. What I think is so critical to understand about that is that when people start looking, and I'm not a fan of people charging by the hour, I see, I believe in more value-based pricing. However, I think looking at what you're getting paid per hour is a good reality check so that you can make sure you're getting paid enough. And, that to me really changes the formula of what you need to make on an hourly basis when you realize that about a third of your time is actually income generating. The rest of it is just to keep that ship alive,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and therein lies the challenge. As an independent trainer, when I was doing that until I was a management consultant actually, and the challenge was there that particularly if you're into training, and I was into mainly sales management training, and management development, that you're winning the clients, you're writing the programs and you're delivering. So there's your third, if you like,
Right.
in a different way.
Yep.
And you're not really earning income until you're delivering, but you've got to find the clients and you've got to do the work, you've got to write the programs that you're going to deliver. But the money is really only in that third where you're actually delivering to the client and you can collect your money.
Yeah, and it was a big wake-up call for me early on. And again, I'm Jeffrey Shaw. I'm here with Cliff Walker, the global expert on home-based business. So Cliff, let's see if we can help these folks more specifically make that transition, because corporate to self-employment is such a transition. We've had numerous conversations here on the show, as well as, on my podcast, The Self-Employed Life. And I've come to refer to it as the inkling, because there's just no other word. I think that, there's this, you get an inkling that there's something you want to do. The problem with that inkling is that once you experience it, you can't quiet it down, right? So, you think you can, it's like, oh, I have an idea, but it is, like I said, it's often like, if you relate it to personal relationships, it's very similar to, when you recognize something that annoys you in a relationship, like you can't unsee it. Same thing with the inkling. You can't unfeel the momentum that it's taking you towards that transition, which is why I created the 12-month timeline, because that's the direction people are working towards. What are some of the first practical steps that you might recommend? Maybe right now they have the inkling of wanting to leave the job, building a life of more freedom, which I know you're a huge proponent of. What might be some of the very first things you suggest they do?
Well, I think research is key. I think research into finding what is the right sort of fit. Obviously budget is dependent, and also how much money you've got behind you. If you're going to jump straight into something, as I say, there are options where you've got a parallel income. You've got some great stuff, Jeffrey. I know I've got a little book here that I'm more than happy to let people have. Its call is for business leaders tired of the corporate shackles, ready to shift into entrepreneurial freedom. It's called The Entrepreneur Mindset Shift. It's owning your own global home business. And it's 10 myths every business leader needs to break through before building their business from home. So that's a great little, there's 10 chapters there, one on each of the different myths. More than happy to make that available. And that's available. It's a real book. And we'll make that available free of charge, including the shipping as well. So,
awesome.
Just for being a guest on here.
Tell us how we can get that. And you mentioned previously, we were chatting about it, and it ships from the U.S. So although you're in South Africa, it ships from the U.S. So it's very easily accessible. And we love tools here because, I think part of, the journey of going from self-employment, from a corporate to self-employment is, in this 12-month period of time, or 3 months, however long it is, this is when you want to be building your toolbox, right? So a book like this is great. How can we get it?
You can get it by going to entrepreneurmindsetshift.com, entrepreneurmindsetshift.com. You'll see a page there, and you just you can have a little read of the page, of course, but there's a button there where you can just request your book, give us your details, your address, and as I say, we'll ship that out, completely free of charge. That's the book. Plus, we'll cover the cost of shipping.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I'll put that link in the comments after this goes live. Because while it's live, I can't comment in the thread, but I'll be sure in the replay that link is there as well.
Yeah, that might help some people. And, there's lots of stuff out there, but and you've got some great stuff. And I think that 12-month plan, it really depends, I think, Jeffrey, on whether people, are ready to make that, decision to really get out right now, or whether they want to sort of find a vehicle that allows them to sort of, ease their way out. But the challenge sometimes with easing your way out is, if you really got skin in the game. I think that's key, that whatever decision someone makes, whether they're ready to leave because maybe they're being downsized or they're being made redundant, or whether they want to ease into it, they have to have the intention to build something. They have to have that intention, as you said. That's critical.
I love that. I love it. You absolutely need the skin of the game. And I'll tell you, in my experience, and again, for my longer term coaching, I do various things, including the Self-Employed Business Institute. But for my longer term one-to-one coaching, most of those clients are folks that I'm helping transition from corporate to self-employment. And I'll tell you what, most of them wait 3 years too long.
Yeah.
And I say that because of the level of anxiety, frustration that they're feeling.
Yeah, there's fear there.
Yeah. They're like running, they're ready to run out the door. And the problem with that is that, in maybe the 3 years that they put it off, what tends to happen is they're so eager to leave the job, they lose their objectivity, and they lose the ability to see what was of value of the job when they were in it, what skill sets they gained, how it can apply to what you want to do, or what happens to a lot of us, right? We create solutions to problems in the world. So if you can maintain that objectivity, you can look at your current position, see how things could be different, and create something that changes that. And in that case, you are solving a problem that already exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this problem seek, problem solve. That's that's a great approach. I think you touched on something though, Jeffrey, that's key really, and that is transferable skills. What skills have you developed over the years that could be transferable into some sort of home-based business that gives you sort of a head start? As I say, if you've been a coach or a trainer or in HR and that sort of thing, internally, you've probably got some great content in terms of training material that you could produce. But there will be transferable skills that people have got that, can be very helpful in looking at what's the sort of home-based business that suits me based on my skill set.
Yeah. Let's talk about the transferable skills even a little bit more, because I think you're really hitting on something that's super important, because on two sides of the coin. On one hand, I find a lot of people have a hard time seeing their core skill sets. The things that they're so good at naturally, that they may have a hard time seeing it. And on the other hand, again, a lot of people, perhaps because they've waited too long, they think they want nothing to do with what they were doing. But the home-based business you might build might be parallel, or even if it is opposite, there's information in where you're coming from. I'm just kind of curious, as a coach yourself, how do you help people see their transferable skills, whether they choose to use them or not? Do you have any exercises or tools that help people see kind of the obvious in some cases?
Well, I think there's, sometimes it can be just about asking people to go away and have a really good think, about what skills they've developed. Maybe they can get some feedback from other people. I mean, it's difficult if you're at work getting feedback from other people. But I think as well, there are quite a few good assessments out there that can help people identify, what the real skill sets are of an individual, and what they might be good at. There's one, I think it's fascinate.com.
Yeah, Sally Hogshead.
Yeah, that's a
favorite of mine.
There's Marcus Buckingham, I think it is. Your strengths finder, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good stuff out there that can help people sort of identify, where are my strengths, what would I be best suited for. And then I think if you can sort of cross check the sort of skills that you've got, and then, get a short list of the type of home-based businesses that you're looking at and see which is the best fit. I think, you've hit the nail on the head, Jeffrey. You need to do that, certainly before next week. If you're leaving next week, you've got to plan ahead and start looking at all that stuff, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's the fact my book is called The Self-Employed Life was very intentional. The word life was in there because I have always said I've made every business decision I've ever made has been first led by how I wanted to live my life, right? And I'm a firm believer in that. Particularly, that to me is why one chooses to become self-employed, right? So that you can decide what's the life I want to live, the hours I want to work, and craft the business, the home-based business that will fit that. I do want to circle back to Sally Hogshead's Fascinate assessment that you brought up, because I want to recommend anybody watching this, check it out. Again, it's I think you can get it at howtofascinate.com. It's been a while.
Like that, yeah,
it's been a while since I've been there. Sally Hogshead, super memorable name, which is why she's never changed it. But find out, here's what I love about that assessment is because I'm at the end of the day, I'm a marketing guy. And what I love about that assessment is that it tells you what the world finds fascinating about you. And that to me makes it so unique compared to any other assessment, because it's one thing to find your transferable skills, your strengths of strength finders, other assessments. It's another thing to be objective and say, well, based on this algorithm and this test I've taken, what does the world find fascinating about me? That can be super informative in order for you to determine a home-based business that the idea for might be right in front of you, and you just find out it's like, yeah, this is how the world perceives me, and let me, as Sally often says, be more of that. Don't change who you are. What she always says, don't change who you are, be more of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you a little strap line as well. I mean, my strap line is achieving ambitious results. It's there on the screen. That came from that. That came from that very assessment.
It's brilliant. It's a brilliant assessment. So as we kind of bring our conversation to a close here, I would love a kind of a story, if you can think of one. What are some of the more you mentioned that you're in a relationship referral type of home-based business. You have been for a lot of years, and I'm sure that's a big part. I know that's a big part of your world. But what other, just to get people's juices flowing, what other home-based business ideas, maybe something that stands out to you as being really unique or one thinks can't be done home-based? Anything come to mind?
It's a tricky one, because there's so many different things, like you said, so many sort of craft type businesses. And then, I think one of the trends right now is the, online digital marketing type businesses. If you can find something that allows you to really leverage being at home, we've got the technology now with the likes of this that we're on today. We've got Zoom, there's so many different technologies. But I think with the world changing, I think COVID has changed the world. And I think, that's probably a trend to tap into, something around that will hook into digital, that you can at least plug digital marketing into, because that, I think, gives you the opportunity, potential to go global. You say, I've got a global business, so a home-based business doesn't have to be a little small business. It can be, a huge global business where you're doing business. If you pick the right vehicle and the right company to partner with, potentially you could be doing business all over the world, and the technology allows you to do that today.
Yeah, I love, you and I were chatting before we went live on the the fact that one of the students in the Self-Employed Business Institute currently in this cohort is in Tokyo, and I made a point that I think the world needs to be a little bit more time zone inclusive, because it is a world full of a lot of time zones, and as our home-based businesses become more global, we need to be aware of that, right? I'm an East Coast guy, and I'm the first one to admit that most East Coasters in the US think the whole world revolves around our time zone. It doesn't, and nor should it moving forward in the global world of doing business. I think we have to be, but the opportunity to go global is tremendous. Any final thoughts, Cliff, that you would offer, especially words of encouragement? Because I think a lot of times people are sitting on the fence. Like, what can you inspire them to get off the fence?
Yeah, I think, just to finish off on that point that you raised there, Jeffrey, I think, a lot of the technology allows us to get over the time zones. We can have recorded videos, recorded audios, lots of different follow-up tools that we can use if we're connecting with people. I think I would just encourage people to explore possibilities, really, to have an open mind, and consider the fact that there are alternatives. If people aren't aware, most of them probably are, but I think Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant is a great place to start to sort of consider some options. But I think it's really about being open and exploring possibilities. I think for me, that's key for people.
Yeah, beautifully said. It's funny, it's reminding me of our conversation, and I said a moment ago about people sitting on the fence. I was having a coaching call with one of my clients once, and he was sitting on the fence, just not willing to commit. And I said to him, and I'll leave us with these words of wisdom. I said to him, the problem with sitting on the fence is eventually you get splinters in your ass. Right? At some point you have to make the decision, as you said earlier, to go all in and have skin in the game. So Cliff, thank you so much for being here and sharing these insights with us. We really appreciate it. Again, I think you and I are of like mind in that we want to encourage people to create a life of their dreams, and maybe a small-based business is just a way to do that. So
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeffrey, for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And if try to join us again. We try to be here almost every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. Not always, but we try to be here every week. So check back in again. Thanks again.